Hello, I am Carrie Moon Dupree, President of the League of Women Voters of Northwest Wayne County. I am representing the League of Women Voters of Michigan Educational Fund Board in this presentation. Welcome to this brief overview about 3 of the statewide ballot proposals on the November 8th ballot. You may also have local proposals. And because there is heightened interest in election security these days, we will also briefly cover Michigan's election laws. This presentation is brought to you by the League of Women Voters Education Fund that works to register and provide voters with election information through our election resource, vote411.org, our printer voter guides, our candidate forums and debates. The League never supports or opposes candidates or political parties. This is an educational presentation. We are presenting both sides of the issue as best as possible. In addition to the 3 ballot proposals and any local proposals, these are the statewide offices that are on the ballot. Sure. The U.S. House of Representatives, the governor and lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general, Supreme Court, university boards, state senators, state representatives, and the 3 ballot proposals. Make sure you vote both sides of the ballot or all the choices in person. What else could be on the ballot? Some places have the county board of commissioners, a clerk, other local officials, circuit court judges. There are numerous versions of the ballot depending on your location. We are fortunate in Michigan to have a constitutional, the constitutional ability that gives the powers to the voters, and not all states do that. Only 24 states have these powers. The first power is called legislative initiative, and it gives the voters the right, if certain conditions are met, to initiate legislation. And the second power is to amend the Michigan Constitution. Nothing in the Michigan Constitution may be altered without the approval of the voters. Any action by the legislature to amend the Constitution must be placed on the ballot. There are 3 statewide ballot proposals to amend the Constitution that all Michiganders will be voting on. They are transparency and term limits, promote the vote 2022, and reproductive freedom for all. Please note, if any of these pass, they go into effect 45 days after it was approved by the voters. So the first ballot proposal we're going to discuss is transparency and term limits. I sent you all the handout and you can follow along. The exact wording for each of these ballot proposals can be found at each of their websites. So I'm not going to read you the exact proposal, but this proposal was placed on the ballot by 2/3 vote of the Michigan legislature. Therefore, no signatures were required. So in other words, this was not initiated by a petition drive, but because it's amending the Constitution, it needs to go on the ballot. This proposed constitutional amendment would require members of the legislature, the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and attorney general to file annual public financial disclosure reports after 2023. Which would include assets, liabilities, income sources, future employment agreements, gifts, travel, reimbursement, and positions held in organizations, except religious, social, or political organizations. It would require the legislature implement, but not limit or restrict reporting requirements, and would replace current term limits for state representatives and state senators with a 12-year total limit in any combination between the House and the Senate, except a person elected to Senate in 2022 may be elected the number of times allowed when that person became a candidate. The entire wording for the constitutional amendment is available at the State Board of Canvassers website or the Transparency and Term Limits website. Michigan legislature has failed to pass any legislation regarding financial transparency for elected officials. Currently, there are no reporting requirements for state officials. Michigan current legislative terms permit 3 terms in the House of Representatives for 6 years and 2 terms in the Senate for 8 years, for a total of 14 years. Michigan has had term limits over the last 30 years, and they were adopted in 1992 by the voters. In the 1990s, numerous states adopted term limits for state offices. Federal offices were not included because it would have had to have been an amendment to the US Constitution. 15 states have term limits now. Michigan is one of 5 states with lifetime limits. The 10 others have limits on consecutive serving. Supporters of this amendment would say that Michigan ranks 50th in the nation in transparency, that this proposal would provide mandatory disclosures, and this proposal would provide term limits that allow the legislators to serve longer in one chamber. Michigan and Idaho are the only 2 states in the country that do not require personal financial disclosure by their state elected officials. This is the major reason the Center for Public Integrity ranks the state of Michigan as 50th in the nation in transparency. The Michigan legislature has discussed various bills to require elected officials to report their finances, but none have passed. If this proposal is passed, beginning in 2024, elected state legislative and state executive officials must file annual financial disclosure reports on their income, assets, liabilities, gifts from lobbyists, positions held in certain organizations, and agreements on future employment with the Secretary of State. After 2022, persons could not be elected to terms in the Michigan House of Representatives or the Michigan Senate for terms that total more than 12 years. A person could serve 12 years in the Michigan Senate or 12 years in the House of Representatives or any combination of terms, but they could not exceed 12 years. The 12-year lifetime limit would keep the benefits of term limits, but would also allow House members to focus on the serious work of legislation in the chamber where they were elected. Gone would be the pressure to immediately start seeking out your next position. Some supporters include the following organizations: American Federation of Teachers, Femmes for Dems, League of Women Voters supports this, Michigan Chamber of Commerce, Michigan Educational Association, Michigan Farm Bureau, Manufacturers Association, Realtors, Council of Carpenters and Millwrights. Note, these are just some of the supporters. You can go to their website for a full list. Opponents to this proposal say that they have been attacked, that the rapid vote that state lawmakers cast in May to place this measure on the November 8th ballot was an ambush. They have argued that the proposal is drafted by politicians and lobbyists who make money off the connection to the government. And some people oppose term limits completely and would rather see them eliminated. Opponents include the Term Limits Defense Fund and US Term Limits. Also check the Term Limit Defense Fund website for any other opponents. The next ballot proposal is Promote the Vote 2022. For more information, you can also go to their website. The Promote the Vote 2022 had turned in 669,972 signatures and they needed only 425.59 signatures. This proposal to amend the state constitution to add these provisions regarding elections. This proposed constitutional amendment would recognize the fundamental right to vote without harassing conduct. Require military or overseas ballots to be counted if postmarked by election day. Provide voter rights to verify identity with a photo ID or signed statement. Provide voter right to a single application to vote absentee in all elections. To require state-funded absentee drop boxes and postage for absentee applications and ballots. Provide that only election officials can conduct post-election audits. Require 9 days of early in-person voting. Allow donations to fund elections, which must be disclosed. And require canvass boards certify election results based only on the official records of the votes cast. The entire wording of this constitutional amendment is available at the State Board of Canvassers website or Promote the Vote 2022 website. Currently, Michigan voters passed the Promote the Vote in 2018, placing many of our voting rights in the Constitution. But Michigan has various laws regulating votes that can be changed by the legislature. Voting rights that are in the Constitution cannot be changed without a vote of the people. Supporters of this ballot proposal say that it will help ensure every voice is heard and every vote is counted in every election, no matter what political party or candidate you support, or where you live, or what you look like. Voting is critical to the integrity of our democracy, which is why fundamental voting rights should be respected and protected in the Michigan Constitution. Promote the Vote 2022 would recognize the fundamental vote without harassing conduct. Promote the Vote 2022 will enhance election integrity and increase election security by modernizing how elections are administered to ensure that every vote counts. If you vote yes, it will ensure our elections are fair, accurate, and secure, and that election results are determined based on the votes of Michigan citizens whose identity is verified prior to counting their vote, whether they're voting in person or by mail. Promote the Vote 2022 provides voters the right to verify their identity with a photo ID or signed statement, the same as it currently is today. Promote the Vote 22 would make voting more convenient and accessible for Michiganders of all backgrounds. It would require that military or overseas ballots would be counted if they're postmarked by election day. And it would provide voters the right to a single application to vote absentee in all elections. The supporters include the following organizations, and you will see the League of Women Voters of Michigan support this ballot proposal. Opponents to this proposal say they claim the measure would open the door to abuse, and they have been opposed to wide expansion of absentee voting because of security and cost concerns. Some opponents of this proposal are Defend Your Ballot, Unborn Equity and Voting Integrity, Secure MI Vote, and Stand Up Michigan. The third ballot proposal is the Reproductive Freedom for All. A proposal to amend the state constitution to establish new individual rights to reproductive freedom, including the right to make all decisions about pregnancy and abortion, allow the state to regulate abortion in some cases, and forbid prosecution of individuals exercising this established right. This proposed constitutional amendment would establish new individual rights, including the right to make and carry out all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility. It would allow the state to regulate abortion after fetal viability, but not prohibit it if medically needed to protect the patient's life or physical or mental health. It forbids state discrimination in enforcement of this right, prohibit prosecution of an individual or a person helping a pregnant individual for exercising their rights established by this amendment, and invalidate state laws conflicting with this amendment. The entire wording for this constitutional amendment is available at the State Board of Canvassers website or Reproductive Freedom for All's website. Currently, Roe versus Wade was overturned on June 24th, 2022 by the US Supreme Court in a decision with a 6-3 vote. Almost half a century ago, Roe versus Wade ruling was the basis for establishing a constitutional right to abortion. This ruling means that states must decide what law will be regulating abortion. In Michigan, we have a 1931 law that bans abortions, but the courts have issued an injunction on that law, so abortions with certain restrictions are still allowed. In 2020, 18% of all pregnancies in Michigan resulted in an abortion and 15% in a miscarriage. Those under 18 accounted for 2% of all abortions in Michigan. Supporters say what this proposal involves important medical decisions that should be guided by a patient's health and well-being, not by a politician's belief. But for far too long, politicians across the country have been fighting to restrict reproductive health care, and they're now gaining ground. Now that the US Supreme Court has overturned Roe versus Wade, a 1931 Michigan law could go back into effect that would make abortion illegal and threaten doctors with prison up to 15 years for providing an abortion. In addition to ensuring access to a broad range of reproductive health care, this amendment would make sure no one goes to prison for providing safe medical care. When people are able to make decisions about their own reproductive health care, including whether and when to have children, they have more control over their health and their economic security. Specifically, this measure will ensure that Michiganders have the right to safe and respectful care during birthing. Everyone has the right to use temporary or permanent birth control. Everyone has the right to continue or end a pregnancy pre-viability, and no one can be punished for having a miscarriage, stillbirth, or abortion. Some supporters include, and you can see that the League of Women Voters supports this ballot proposal. This opponents say that the Michigan law, 1931 Michigan law that bans abortion except to save the life of the mother and make it a felony to perform, should continue to be the law of the land. This amendment would repeal dozens of state laws, including our state's ban on tax-funded abortions, partial birth abortion ban, and fundamentally alter the parent-child relationship by preventing parents from having input on their child's health. Opponents to this proposal, and you can see the listed citizens to support Michigan Women and Children, Alliance for Life, West Michigan, American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, Citizens for Traditional Values, Michigan Catholic Conference, Michigan Family Forum, Michigan Knights of Columbus, and Right to Life, Michigan. So now we'll switch to the second part of this presentation and talk about the election process in Michigan. And we're going to focus on three key factors: registering to vote, absentee voting, and certification of the election. These are the current procedures and regulations that we have. So to register to vote through the 15th day, but For October 24th, you can register to vote by mail, in person at the Secretary of State, your county or city township clerk's office, voter registration agencies such as voter registration drives, or online. From the 14th day before the election through 8 p.m., you only have one option, and that is in person at the city township clerk's office or a satellite office, and you must bring proof of residency. Absentee ballots were available as of September 29th. You can vote absentee up until the election day. In person, visit your city township clerk's office, submit an application in person, and the absentee ballot will be provided in person. You can vote right then and there and submit the absentee ballot in person, or take the absentee ballot at home, vote at home, and then drop it off or mail it back. By mail, if you vote at home, you can submit the completed application by mail, or you can put it in a drop box. Note, voters must sign the ballot envelope with their official signature in order for your ballot to count, and ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on election day. You cannot vote absentee ballot and then go to your precinct and vote again. There is a list of the absentee ballots that have come in. However, if you've changed your mind on an absentee ballot, you can go to your clerk's office and they will pull your absentee ballot and spoil that ballot and issue you a new one, or you could vote in person if that's what you decide to do. So the advantages of absentee voting are there are no lines, busy people can vote when it's convenient, no rides are needed to the polls, and you have time to study the choices. In August of 2022, the state elections director, Jonathan Bratter, said about 2.1 million voters participated in the elections, and half of them, slightly over half of them, voted absentee. So clearly absentee ballot voting is gaining in popularity. Once the election is over, the County Board of Canvassers is charged with certifying the elections. Every county has a county board of canvassers. They are made up of 4 members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, with staggered 4-year terms. They are appointed to the County Board of Commissioners from names supplied by the 2 parties. Their duties are that within 14 days of an election, they meet to review the election paperwork from the precincts, to certify election results in the county, and a majority need to vote to certify. They send the election certification report to the State Board of Canvassers. These meetings are open to the public to observe, but not to participate. Trained League of Women voter members observe the meetings and report any irregularities. The State Board of Canvassers is made up of 4 members, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans with staggered 4-year terms, and they are appointed by the governor from names provided by the 2 parties. Their duties include, within 6 weeks of the election, to meet to review election certification reports from the counties, to certify election results, a majority vote to certify 3 out of 4. These meetings are open to the public to observe, but not to participate. Trained league members observe the meetings and report any irregularities. The following voter resources are available. You can always go to the Michigan Secretary of State website. There's a wealth of information there. MichiganVoting.org, and of course, a plug for our own vote411.org. If you go to the vote411.org, there is a tab to put in your address, and up will pop what's on your ballot for your particular address. We have sent questions to all the candidates, and we have their replies verbatim, exactly how they replied to us on this site. We also indicate if we have not received a response from a candidate. So be informed. An informed voter is a good voter. Make sure you vote either absentee or in person. Encourage your family members to vote. And one last thing before we take questions, before you cast your ballot, we encourage you to check out Vote 411. Remember, just enter your address and your particular ballot will come up. So I can take questions. I'm going to get off the sharing screen. Remember, this is an educational presentation. We're not here to debate the issues, but if there is a question on the ballots, I can direct you to where you can find answers. So let me get out of the screen share. Okay, so being there isn't that many of us, if anybody has a question, if you would unmute and ask your question, we'll see if we can help you out.
I have a question.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. If proposal 2 and proposal 3 pass, when would they go into effect?
Any proposal that passed goes into effect 45 days after the election.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have a question? Seeing none, I want to thank you for being on this presentation.
Wait,
Marjorie? Yes.
my guest just arrived and has a question.
Okay.
It's on proposal 1.
Okay.
And I was a little confused about the last part of that proposal, which says replace current term limits, etc. And as you go down, it says, except a person elected to Senate in 2022 may be elected the number of times allowed when that person became a candidate. So does that indicate that that the 12 year limit would not apply to that person?
Yes, that's what it's indicating. Because it doesn't go into effect till 45 days afterwards, that person would have already been elected under the old rules.
And that's what, 14 years?
14 years. The main difference between the two on the current term limits, what we often see happening is that a person would be, let's say, a representative and term limit out of there, and then switch over to the Senate. And what the people that are supporting this say is that sometimes spending your whole term limit in one position has the benefit that you learn how the legislature works. You can see any legislation that you were doing. You can see it all the way through. That the current term limits has given us a legislature that nobody has any institutional knowledge, because they're always term limiting out and then moving to a different job. And unfortunately, a lot of them moved to lobbying. So this is shortening the term limits by 2 years, but they can be in any capacity. You could do 2 years as a representative and then run for the Senate, or you could stay the whole time as a representative.
And the advantage would be that they would get both sides of the story, or?
Well, the advantage is if you have a representative, let's say, who's working on maybe educational reforms, and they are term limited out on a much shorter basis than they would be on this new proposal. So a lot of times a legislator will start working on an issue and then they're term limited out, and somebody brand new comes in and you start the educational process all over again. I saw an ad where glibly they said that new legislators takes them 2 years to find where the restrooms are, let alone to learn how to be effective in getting anything passed. And that's part of the gridlock of what we have in current legislators, because everybody, the churn is happens because of the shorter term limits. The other side says, well, this has opened up the opportunity for more people to get involved in politics, because legislators can't sit there for the rest of their political life. I have In my professional life, I worked in senior industries, and I can tell you once term limits came in, we had to do a whole lot more education of new legislatures on senior issues because they just didn't have the depth of knowledge as they turned over every few years. Anybody else?
So it would allow them to see through.
See through legislation. If somebody decides that they like to be in the Senate the whole time, 12 years, and run for the Senate, they could stay in the Senate. Again, we have natural term limits because they still have to be voted into office every few years. But this would not mean that they would have to go from representative to state senator or vice versa in order to stay in the legislature.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Your handout has all the additional websites for these organizations. I have already voted absentee and have taken it up to my township clerk's office. So I'd like to say I won't see any more political ads, but that's not true.
I have a question.
Yes, Betty?
The question is, were there any organizations that actually sent out, legitimate organizations that sent out the request for absentee ballot? Because we got one that we ignored. And my husband and I were concerned that it might not have been valid.
So a request for an absentee ballot, in previously, I know like the township clerk sent out requests for absentee ballot. But I don't know of any organization, let's say like the League of Women Voters or something like that, that has done that.
Yeah, this was not from the township clerk. This was, we couldn't tell quite who it was from. It was something like Concerned Voters of Michigan or something.
That sounds suspicious. You wouldn't happen to still have that, Betty, would you?
I think I made sure and put it in the round file. So I'm sorry I don't have it.
Okay. Yeah, I would be suspicious of anything not coming from your city or township clerk's office.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for attending this presentation. I will have it up on our YouTube channel and our local website, and we may even post it on Facebook. So thank you and have a nice day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.